Hello, and welcome back to my Fire Emblem 8 Ephraim Reverse Recruitment Ephraim Route LTC, brought to you by Typhoon Carter. Today we have Endgame, which is split into two parts, and with this map, on Ephraim Route versus Erica Route, the first part of Endgame is a little bit different in dialogue and in some of the enemy composition, but in the context of this run, that doesn't really matter as we're just going to go straight for the kill. Both parts of Endgame is kill boss, and they're fairly trivial kill boss for the most part, and you don't need to do anything too crazy to pull them off. What we do here is we need to send in a Wyvern Knight that will land a critical and a Pierce proc, as Pierce ignores the defense of enemies, and it basically makes it 0, so a critical plus a Pierce would be able to kill just about any enemy that is encountered, more or less. And Leon, we only need 25 attack to pull this off, so it's fairly trivial, and we decide to send Tana in for the kill, and she has a killer lance and is just going to stomp Leon with one clean blow. So that is that, and that is part 1 of Endgame dealt with. And with this, we're going to head to part 2 of Endgame, where we face Fulmortis, the Demon King, who is one of the crappiest final bosses in the entire franchise, which says a lot considering this franchise has a lot of final bosses that are either just total jokes or are very pathetic. And the Demon King, his reason is mostly because of the fact that we have so many means of dealing effective damage to him that a lot of his big stats don't really actually mean anything. Plus we also have Pierce as an option, which is also viable, but we don't even need that here really, because the Demon King is just that bad. And so we decide to just mess around here, as we have Amelia taking the first shots at the Demon King, and we're just going to do a little bit of warping shenanigans, and we're just liberally using the warp staff. A lot of these extra warp uses are just totally unnecessary, more or less. And we decide to trade the warp staff around, and we're going to warp Myrrh because Myrrh is just short by 1 tile. Thanks game, what a great design. But besides that, and one thing to note is that Myrrh on Ephraim Route, because she replaces Erica, she gets a lot of extra levels, and her stats are actually just way better. Especially considering the fact that the auto levels take into account 100% growth, so her stats look way better, and she can just take a lot more hits, such as the fact that she only gets free hit KO by the Demon King here, which is actually pretty nice, all things considered, as her stats are more or less just near the max. And one thing I will say is that the Demon King is fairly fast, relatively speaking, and you do need a decent amount of speed to double him, but especially with 100% growth, that's not particularly hard to reach. And Amelia just takes another swing at the Demon King, and we're just going to give this kill to Cyrene. Cyrene, who basically got screwed out of a lot of experience compared to her Erica Reverse Recruitment incarnation, gets a chance to redeem herself, and she gets to flex that Autumnla once again, and she will just finish the Demon King and finish this playthrough. And with that blow, the Demon King is done for, and we are once again finished this run. And with all that said and done, we're going to go straight to the Turncounts, and then I will do a short Q&A session. Now, with this run saw a lot of notable turn saves in the early game, in particular, and this run we managed to crack the sub 60 turn mark, although I think we could have gone lower, but I'll talk more about that later. And for our Q&A, our first question is from Subway Boss Emmett, who asks, out of the 2 reverse recruitment runs, which one did I enjoy more, be it in planning or execution? And to answer that, I'd say the one that I enjoyed more in terms of both planning and execution was my Ephraim route reverse recruitment run. This is mostly because like my Erica reverse recruitment run, I actually didn't spend as much time optimizing it and planning it out as much as I could. This is for a couple reasons. One, like Crash did a reverse recruitment run that was centered around Erica route, but his was full recruitment. So like he already had like most of the skeleton of the run laid out, and considering I was doing incomplete recruitment, the most I had to do was like find an alternative option for warp, as I couldn't quite get Sally to reach warp in time in the constraints of reverse recruitment, and the fact that I had to find an alternative strategy to get a warp user, which in this case was Natasha. And the other thing is that with Erica reverse recruitment, particularly on Erica route, I just hated just how bad a lot of the warp options we had were. Like Laura Shell has D rank staves, and like Sally had a hard time reaching warp in the constraints of like skipping recruitments. And the other notable thing is the fact that Natasha was probably the only one who could reasonably reach warp under those constraints, so my options were heavily limited. And the other thing was just that with Ephraim route and like Ephraim reverse recruitment as a whole, you had a couple more warp options that just worked out better. And also the fact that Ephraim route just had a lot more interesting maps, like as far as planning out goes. Like I had a lot of fun planning out chapter 10 of Ephraim route, especially with like the whole killing Selena, which causes Selena to like it doesn't even do anything when you kill Selena, and the fact that the game like this is like objective is hard-coded to kill Baran, so like the game just carries out the scene, which was kind of funny, so I had a lot of fun with that one. Another thing I had a lot of fun with was like planning out the early game, especially finding those like turn saves that I missed in like my initial run, considering the fact that like I was able to find like a turn save in chapter 5 thanks to like General Horus helping me out there, and also like the Sally like promotion and like the experience management being so tight, so that was just fun to plan out, even considering the fact that I had to replay the first 8 chapters like 3 to 4 times just to like get a turn save on chapter 8, only for me to learn later on that no could actually save a turn, but by that point I was just way too burnt out. The other notable maps that I had a lot of fun executing and planning out was chapter 9, which was why like feeding Amelia a million kills was like done for like in 5x just so I could have her promote there, and like the tight movement to like get that necessary turn save. So like that was just a really fun clear I had like with planning out, even if it was frustrating at times, such as the fact that I had to miss out on the ocean seal. And another one that I think I mentioned was chapter 14, especially because like at first I thought I could get Purge, so I thought getting Motor might have been necessary, only to turn out that it wasn't, unless I went Laura Shell route for warping, but that's something for another day. But honestly, like just figuring out getting how I was gonna get that recruitment within 4 turns was just real fun. And then speaking of like planning out for LTCs, the next question is from Elwin Wanderer, who asks, how long does it take for me to plan out each of these chapters? Honestly, to answer that question, it heavily depends on the run. My first ever LTC run that I posted on my channel, which was the FE8 hard for LTC, that one took a fair bit of planning, and the prologue chapters actually didn't take me too long to plan out, as a lot of it I realized was just brute force rigging, because that's how like bad it was, like if you're trying to turn floor the prologue chapters. And although like prologue 8 probably took me like 4 or 5 hours to like play out, and that's considering the fact that I also had to reset and start from the beginning too, because I screwed up my routing and I thought I could get like a 2-turn or something, only to have my dreams shattered. And then planning out the late game for FE8, that one took me like a fair bit, but like I was mostly winging it for the most part, as like there were many runs that were done before where I was able to figure out, oh hey, okay, this is what I need to do, and then like most of the changes I had to make were like fairly minor. And also the fact that I had played FE8 a fair bit prior to doing that run, although the thing I had to plan out was like making that massive 4-on forge for Katarina. With Erica reverse recruitment, that one didn't take me as long. As I mentioned before, Crash had a run that I was able to see, even if like his reverse recruitment modifier that he made was like a little bit different. For the most part, the foundation remained mostly the same, and as I mentioned before, it was just the changes, the small changes that I had to make. And then with Ephraim reverse recruitment, I think that took me about 3 months or so, because I had to keep replaying like the early game to like optimize that. And then the next question is from USS Gordon Captain, who asks, why are most LTCs glitchless? To answer this question, I might not be the most qualified person to speak on this, but like with using glitches in LTC, I think the thing is that most people usually associate using glitches and whatnot with like speed running and task runs, mainly because like in those cases it just makes sense because you're trying to shave a lot of time off the clock and trying to complete the game as fast as possible, and enemy phases in Fire Emblem sometimes takes too long, so using stuff like the enemy control glitch is like, it makes sense and is somewhat necessary under those restrictions. Now, as for why we don't see it often in LTC, I think for like most guys, or at least some guys that I know, it's just that using glitches in an LTC run just doesn't make the run as interesting and makes it a little bit, I guess you could say, boring in some instances. Although I know there are like guys who do that anyways, because like they're trying to get like the absolute lowest turn floor possible. And the other thing I'd probably say with regards to that is that like in some games like it is used, such as like Shadow Dragon, where there's like that weird warp glitch that I'm not even sure how to describe. It's like you sort of warp the person, but then like it's like you don't, it's like their position doesn't really change. It's weird. Watch like Ruidaf's like task run of Shadow Dragon, that'll make sense. And I think he uses it like once in his like Shadow Dragon LTC, where he like skips like any recruitments that cost turns and don't like save enough per se. And we are like starting to run out of time, so that's like all the questions I'll take. And as for what I'm going to do next, I currently have a Path of Radiance full recruitment LTC in the works right now, but like I've been very burnt out from like doing all the commentary and whatnot, so like I'll be taking a little bit of a break from like posting that, so it might be some time before I upload that onto YouTube. And with that, thank you to everyone who has stuck with me all the way through and decided to watch both routes of Fire Emblem 8 Reverse Recruitment. This is Typhoon Carter, and I am going to sign out, and I will see you guys next time.